Welcome. This is episode 7 of the Ask and You Shall Receive podcast. I'm honored today. I have a really good guest. I've had you picked on this list for a little bit, man. This guest, his name is Brendan Ryan. He is a CEO and he is the CEO of Click Customers Digital Marketing. I'm telling you, with his experience and with the knowledge and value he provides, you need to reach out to him and give this guy a follow and keep him on your radar, please. So without further ado, please welcome Mr. Brendan Ryan, and we're going to get into a great episode.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Now, I gave you a big intro, man, because I really want to just jump in on what it is you do, man. I really think you have a great story. You've pretty much have like the typical work the 9 to 5. You pretty much hit all the criteria of someone that could have stopped, could have gave up, could have settled, and you pretty much went against the common narrative that many people are against and said, I'm gonna make something out of nothing.
Yeah, it's tough. I actually am a former pharmacist, and I went through my whole life. My parents really kind of guided me in that direction, wanted me to go to college and get a good job and a degree and everything. And back then, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. My passion was working out, lifting. I was really into bodybuilding, actually. And I went all the way through that. I actually thought about quitting in pharmacy school because I could tell I just wasn't about it.
Hmm.
But they my parents asked me, okay, that's fine. What are you going to do instead? And I didn't have an answer for them. And that's pretty much why I continued to go through with it and went through pharmacy school, got a job in pharmacy. Was residency trained. I got two certifications, one for critical care, one for cardiology, and I worked in an ER, thinking that if there was anything in pharmacy that would kind of excite me, it would be that, but not really. I really felt like I was not really making much of a difference. I didn't like that. I want to be able to make a difference and add value in some way, and I felt kind of powerless, honestly. And the other thing that really bothered me about it was that I had a really low ceiling. Like, you start off with a great salary in pharmacy. You make over 100K right from the very beginning, but I capped out very quickly. Especially in a hospital setting, you can only go up like one or two levels from there, and you're not really making that much more money. You have a lot more responsibility, maybe a little bit better hours, but not much more money. And that really bothered me, especially with the economic climate that we find ourselves in today, with inflation being so high and all of that. 100K isn't exactly what it used to be, right, in terms of purchasing power. And I have a young family, so because felt unfulfilled, because I didn't like being capped so low, I started looking into starting my own business, which started as a side hustle, just some digital marketing for the home services industries. And I had a hard time niching down in the beginning, but ultimately landed on concrete and remodeling as being the two niches that I really targeted with Quick customers. And we grew it from there, scaled it up. And yeah, we work with about a dozen or two contractors now, mostly throughout Florida, but also throughout the United States.
Yeah, and I really want to key in the fact that your journey and the process you've gone through is really what's allowed you to be in the position you're in now, where I'm seeing you give value to so many people, where it's through coaching, through the great content you provide, through the newsletter, and also kind of helping people realize, just like you said, there's more than that limit that you hit, whether whatever job position it might be. There's more possible out there in terms of not only income but providing value, and I think you do a great job of that in your content by really honing in on the key skills like sales, marketing, and honestly, when it comes down to it, at the end of the day, it's really communication between one person to another and helping them meet their needs and providing that value. So I really want to kind of give people that whole idea of where you came from, because in pharmacy and this and that, you don't really get sales skills and the marketing skills in pharmacy school. So
Definitely not.
kind of let them know, how you kind of just almost either self-taught or just built yourself to where you are now.
Yeah, yeah. In terms of all the business knowledge, it's completely self-taught. I talk to a lot of young entrepreneurs or older entrepreneurs that usually have it modeled for them in some way. They had
Mm,
a dad or an uncle or somebody in their family that was a successful entrepreneur, and they saw that and always wanted that. And I think that if I had that in my family, I would have been able to determine that that's what I wanted to do a lot sooner. But because I didn't have that example, I had to kind of stumble through and figure it out on my own. And it took a while really for me to realize like this is what I wanted to do. I stumbled through a couple things after pharmacy school. I looked into trading. I looked into trading options, and I really liked that analytical aspect and the strategy that goes into that. I actually played a little bit of online poker for a while, which was actually very similar in terms of taking advantage of probabilities and things like that. But once I found entrepreneurship, I fell in love with that like right away. And it was finally like it clicked for me. It was like the first time that I found something again that I was super passionate about since bodybuilding. That was like the last thing that I really felt like I was just obsessed with, like completely enthralled with learning more about it and just being the
mm,
most curious person that you can be. And yeah, you mentioned like self-taught. I think that we're entering an age nowadays where you can be self-taught with just about anything. You can find YouTube instructional videos for anything. That's been the case for like a decade. But now on top of that, you have AI entering the scene too, which is really going to augment that learning process. And I harp on this a little bit, but I think that our traditional didactic school system is pretty antiquated, and we'll
mm.
see that kind of fall apart in the future because tuition prices are just completely unsustainable as they are right now. They inflate more than anything. It's absolutely crazy, and it's just really become kind of a degree mill business type thing where even the classes they offer in universities now a lot of times they're online and you're like what am I doing? Like you can go learn open source software from MIT and all kinds of crazy stuff like that. So I think increasingly my prediction actually is that we'll see more the younger generations like Gen Z and younger increasingly be entrepreneurs because they'll realize that they can learn anything anyway. And it's never been easier to start a business online. You can go on LegalZoom right now and spin up an LLC, buy the domain, do a one-pager website, run the ads for it. Never in history has it been so easy to get that going. You could literally do all of that front-end work within a day. It's crazy. So I think we'll see more and more people doing the same thing in the future. And with my personal brand and my content, like employee to entrepreneur, I want to appeal especially to people that were me. I'm trying to appeal to me, basically, people that were employees and felt like they messed up, they missed their mark, and now they feel trapped by their job. They
Mm.
feel like, man, I should have been a businessman, I should have been an entrepreneur, and now I have this steady income, and I'm like addicted to the steady income, right? Because you have expenses that almost meet that income, or it might have responsibilities. Like I have a young family, for instance. I have a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old. So trying to appeal especially to like the family men in a W-2 type job that are like, how can I do better? How can I like live out my dream, my passion, have more time for my family, make unlimited money essentially, like have no cap to what I can make and really add value to the world because I truly believe that everybody has unique skills and perspectives and that they have something of value to add to the world. So I love the idea of there being more entrepreneurs because I think the world needs more entrepreneurs because entrepreneurs solve problems and the world has a ton of problems, right? So there's room for everybody. Like I want to see this flood. I'm welcoming it.
Yeah, I really want to touch on a few things there because you really brought up some key points of the fact that, the market now, it's very easily accessible to do this. But I think there's kind of 2 points that really stood out to me was, you said you went into something and did something because you had curiosity and passion for it. It wasn't really the urge that you kind of see today in society where it's I want to do it for either the clout, the fame, or the monetary result.
Hmm.
And secondly, as well, the main thing is fulfilling your calling, providing that additional value. And like yourself, it's an extremely tough position to be in when, just like you said, you're the man of the house, you have a family, you want to do everything you can to provide. At the end of the day, that job, to most people, as we say, it's what? Putting bread on the table and clothes on our backs. So we find that as long as we're doing that, we're doing it. But we really shouldn't be doing that at the expense of leaving our full potential on the table when we could also provide even more that's possible. So it's a hard mindset shift to get out of, especially with how society is programmed today through the school system, and whether it be older generations or however it might be, it's really conditioning you to, sit in a desk or do a job, do a task. These kinds of older style education methods are really trying to keep people in that form, but today's world, it's really not like that at all. And I really think it's a respectable journey for someone to say, it's great that this job is doing what it needs for me and my family, but I'm truly meant for more and to give more. And you being an example and kind of, being a leader and helping others is really great. But I want you to touch on some mindset things, because this isn't just, a tomorrow or a next week kind of shift. This is really a process where mentally and emotionally you're going to go through some roller coasters.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I think you mentioned, you made me think of something that I should maybe walk back or clarify for just a moment. Is when I say that it's never been easier to start a business. That's true, right? But there's also challenges today that maybe we didn't have in the past in terms of distraction or even the
Mm.
economic environment that we find ourselves in compared to what our parents or grandparents did. Um, and so I should say that it's not easy. Starting a business is very difficult. Like the statistic that everybody knows about, that 9 out of 10 businesses don't make it, is very much true. It's actually much easier to buy an already established business than to try to start your own. So I say that it's easy in the sense that, if you rewind to, like, say, our grandparents' generation, for instance, a family man who had a job like a pharmacist or something, it wouldn't have even been possible for them to even think about starting a business. It just no way. Whereas now it is, because you can start online businesses that have relatively little overhead. And so I just wanted to clarify that before I jump into the mindset thing, because yeah, the mindset is huge. That's actually, I think I want to write a book someday, and actually that might be the main topic of the transition from employee to entrepreneur, because they're totally different mindsets. And I think that is absolutely key to being able to make it work. I actually really, really believe that investing in your mindset is like the 80/20 of life. And what I mean by that is, like, if you've ever heard of the Pareto principle, it states that 20% of your actions produce 80% of your results.
Mm.
So investing in your mindset is that 20% that produces the 80%. It seems a little backwards because everybody tells you that, it doesn't matter unless you actually do something, which is true. You actually do have to take massive action on your dreams and goals. Absolutely. But investing in your mindset and making sure you're in the right mindset so that you can take effective action is the step number one. Nothing starts until you have the thought. It all starts with thought, right? And then it comes out in action and habits and eventually destiny. So
Mm.
I'm huge on mindset. And I've had people ask me, well, what is the mindset shift? But it's very complicated. It's not just like one thing, right? So there's a lot that goes into it. And so, for instance, a lot of employees will have a mindset of scarcity versus abundance, right? So when people think about, like, how do I get more money? If you're an employee, a lot of times they think about, well, okay, maybe I can cancel this subscription, or maybe we shouldn't, like, go on vacation this year, or maybe
Mm.
won't eat out as much. And they're thinking about saving, right? But the problem with saving is that there is a limit to how much you can save. You can only save, how much you make, basically, right? Whereas entrepreneurs don't think that way. If there's something that they need to afford, they think, how can I afford it? How can I make more money so that I can afford this thing? So you see the difference is that there's an abundance mindset versus scarcity mindset. Another huge mindset shift is the way that employees versus entrepreneurs view failure. And this is the fault of our school system, right? We're taught in school to avoid failure at all costs. You don't want to fail. You want to get it right. And it makes us afraid to fail. And that very much plays out even when you're an employee. When you go to your job, you're kind of nervous the first day or a few weeks or whatever, because you want to make sure that you're doing things right and not failing, right? But entrepreneurs have to make the mindset shift of failure being actually part of the process. It's okay to fail. That's how you learn. I like to even say that failure doesn't even really exist. Like, I don't even like to use the word failure. It's just part of the process. Like, would you tell, like, if you had a baby, right, and you watch them start to learn how to walk and they fall the first few times, are you calling that failure? No, man, it's part of the process. They're gonna get there eventually. It's just that they're not very good at it at first. So I don't like even the term failure. I don't even want to say that it exists. It's just part of the process. You have to go through it, and that's a huge mindset shift for for people that are trying to make the transition from employee to entrepreneur. Because, for instance, like a lot of people, I'm big also on personal branding. I think everybody should really be trying to build a personal brand. Get yourself out there on social media, let people know who you are, be vulnerable. And I need to do a better job about being vulnerable for sure. Like I need to talk more about my family and family men and all that kind of stuff. But a lot of people will get afraid to do that because they're just scared. They'll be afraid that their first videos will suck and people will make fun of them. And the thing is, they will suck, but who cares? It's just part of the process. Keep going and you get better and better and better at it. So there's a lot that goes into it, right? There's that mindset shift. Like I think if I were to write that book someday, I'd have each one of those be like a chapter, like scarcity to abundance, failure to just part of the process, or literally failure to exist or whatever. So yeah, I'm huge on mindset. I think that mindset's really important. I spend over an hour with a morning routine every day where I do things like meditation, do breathing exercises. I have an identity document and affirmations that I go through to get myself in the right mindset, because everything that you consume is programming you. Meaning, like, if you watch the news, if you watch Netflix, even the music you listen to, the books that you read, all of those inputs are programming you. So it's key to program yourself, or at least be selective with what you take in, because what you take in is what you're going to put out. So take some time to do that, or like or some sort, even if it's just 5 minutes every day, and try to program yourself in a positive way. And I think it'll go a long way to success.
Yeah, and those points are super key because especially from schooling, a lot of people begin to build this fear around, either putting themselves out there or not getting the right outcome. And even for me, I'm still fairly young and I'm learning to work out of these things, not thinking in a state of lack. I'm starting to believe that this universe has more than enough, not only for me and you, but for everyone here.
Mhm.
But it's kind of our own faults and a little bit of society as well that we're kind of fragmented to think, oh, there's only this much. And it's similar to the employee mindset, because a lot of employees think I need more income and they immediately start to think of other ways to sacrifice their time or give another job, when they can kind of, it limits their ability to really think out of the box when, this world has multiple possibilities.
Yeah.
But I do want to ask you yourself, I'm sure you had obstacles going through this, whether it was starting to accept failure and kind of transferring your mindset from either paycheck to paycheck and lack to abundance. So what are, like, common obstacles that most people are going to come about as they start to consider, hey, maybe I want to be a little bit more than just an employee and start to become an entrepreneur? Through that journey, what else do you think they're gonna come about? And I know, like you said, the supporting documentation, learning, reading, surrounding yourself with the right mentors, but what else, could really help that learning curve?
Yeah, so and that's another mindset shift actually you bring up, viewing the things as obstacles rather than opportunities. Every time you see an obstacle or maybe you call it a problem, those are opportunities that, like I mentioned earlier, entrepreneurs solve problems. So anytime you can identify a problem that the marketplace has, that's a potential business for you right there.
Mm,
So that's a huge mindset shift as well. And so I'll speak personally to the obstacles that I encountered, especially because again I'm trying to target myself in terms of my personal brand,
mhm.
which is family men essentially that are employees that want to become entrepreneurs. I think if you're a younger guy, like if you're this 19, 20-year-old dude right out of high school or college or whatever, and you have no responsibilities, especially if you have no debt, if you're lucky enough to like get out of college without debt nowadays, it's it's wide open for you. And that's actually a perfect time to be an entrepreneur. So if you find yourself in that position, do it now because you could potentially build multiple businesses, have them all go bankrupt, and you don't have anything to lose anyway. But when you're talking about somebody like me, somebody that had a wife and two kids, cars, a dog, a house, lots of responsibilities and obligations, then you have a lot to lose. And so that becomes the problem, right? Is that's an
Mm,
obstacle in and of itself, is that a lot of people, when they jump into entrepreneurship, they might be able to burn the boats, so to speak. What that means is, in other words, like they just jump head first all in and leave everything behind, even if it means making less money. That's not really an option for family men. They have to at least replace some of their income to the point where they can support their family. They got to keep food on the table. And one of the biggest obstacles for me was health insurance, because health insurance is expensive, right? And when you
mm,
have two young kids, my wife actually has a chronic condition too that she has to take medication for. That's not something that we can go without for a very short or very long at all, really. Like, so that was something that I had to look into. And there's various different things that you can do about that, right? If you have the option of like joining the reserve, that's an option. There's Obamacare. There's cheaper options like HMOs and all kinds of things like that. But ultimately, if you look around enough, you can find insurance brokers that will give you pretty good deals on PPO plans, which are good insurance plans, so that you can make the transition. And it's not cheap, don't get me wrong, but it's going to be cheaper than you might have planned originally. At least with my old employer, even though they did pay a good amount in terms of health insurance, they were kind of decreasing how much they contributed over time. So it's
mm.
the benefits, I think, are getting worse and worse for employees in this economic environment. But that was a huge hurdle or obstacle that we had to figure out. That plus having to essentially build the business while I still kept the job, so that it got to a certain point where I could make the leap, if that makes sense. Because I couldn't just make the leap completely and hope for the best. I could have, but that would have been a little bit reckless, a little bit irresponsible when you have a family. So I had to do both at the same time for a while and burn the candle at both ends. And that takes a lot of communication, a lot of support from your wife, in my case, your spouse, if you're female, your husband. And so you have to be of the mindset and keep reminding yourself and each other that you are sacrificing the short term so that you can have a better life down the road, right? So short term pain for long term gain, so that you can have more time to spend with your family. You can take them on the vacations, you can get the bigger house, you can afford more kids. In our case, we want to have more kids. We'd like to homeschool our kids, and I would love to be able to travel with them. They're kind of too young for that now, but I want to go show them the world, basically. So I'm glad that we did that for all those reasons, right? Because we want to have a better life. I'm not somebody that can just settle, basically, for mediocre. And I think that that's just such an unfortunate thing that I think happens. I suspect that happens to a lot of people when they get locked into like where I was at, where you feel like you might have made a mistake, you picked the wrong job, and you feel trapped by your job, and now you're stuck with it. And they let their dreams die, basically. They kind of let it go, and they just settle for the 9 to 5, coming home, watching Netflix for a few hours, going to sleep, and doing it all over again. It just feels like no life to live, really, to me. Some
Mm.
people are perfectly happy that way. I mean, trust me, entrepreneurship isn't for everybody, right? You have to have a mindset of high risk tolerance and massive action. You got to work and hustle and grind your butt off. But I think it's 100% worth it if you're willing to do all those things.
Yeah, and I really want to take a moment here, especially where not only the status of the world is today, but also the status of the current economy. Because I really feel for a lot of people and a lot of families right now, especially like we're talking about. If you're working a 9 to 5, you might have not gotten a raise over the past few years, but guess what? Your money has definitely gone down in value. So if you're already struggling enough to make ends meet and whatever the 9 to 5 paycheck is, it's already diminished any wiggle room that there kind of was, if there even was one existing, with inflation and things like that. And, like you said, being able to really provide for your family, whether it's your kids, the proper education, the proper schooling, the proper, way to introduce them to the world so they can kind of have a better chance than you did about going about everything. It really lets me know that, there's really a lot at stake here. And the ones who really get the reward, I guess, for just going for it when there's a lot on the line are the ones who are going to end up taking that risk. And it might mean, when you come home, not just hanging out and getting comfortable. It might mean putting in those extra hours. And I really want to touch on that because I feel it's almost a requirement nowadays, especially with the way financial tightening and just pretty much the way the world is working against the common, human being, I would say. It takes a lot more initiative to really combat that and go after it. But I also think the reward on the other side of even taking that risk to do so is well worth it. And on the other side, you might look and see, man, I was able to provide for my family. I was able to do these things that I didn't even think I could do.
Mhm.
And I really want to touch on that because, like you said, this is a process. It doesn't mean you quit your job next week and all of a sudden your business is, making that income replaceable right away. Was there a process where you either had to like save some money, start to see certain milestones hit in your business where you were like, okay, if this can keep up consistently enough, maybe then I can consider resigning from my job at the end of the month or the end of the year. And just want you to touch on that.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think that yeah, it's really tough on families of all kinds, even hitting the middle class real bad right now in terms of the economy. And you can either react two ways, right? Like you can lament and call yourself a victim and be really unhappy and miserable about it, or you can look at it as a blessing to disguise and have it be something that drives you to a better life. And so I hope we see lots of people go that route, right? Instead, because yeah, you could have got a raise last year. You could have even conceivably got, a 4%, 5% raise last year and still lost purchasing power. It's just absolutely crazy. Absolutely crazy. So I'm surprised that I don't see more people trying to do it. If you look at the statistics, there were a ton of people that opened up businesses in 2020 and 2021, and it went kind of back down on 2022. And I was like, really? Come on, like really? Like it's still rough, man. It was still rough in 20. Actually, it was really rough in 2022. But I think actually it's the perfect time to start a business as things are trending down and the economy is getting worse because you want to be able to do it when it's hard. Because if you can do it when it's hard, you're going to be able to ride that wave all the way up and really be able to profit when the times turn around and are good again. If you can only build a business when times are good, then your business isn't going to last. But yes, it is 100% a process. 100% a process. It's something that it takes time, right? I think the book, The 4 Hour Work Week, like a lot of people think of that name, and that gives you a vision of that laptop lifestyle where you only work 4 hours on your Amazon store on the beach in the Bahamas, and then you sip martinis for the rest of the day or whatever. Really not a realistic expectation. I'm not saying that nobody ever gets there. There are certainly people that live that lifestyle, but they work their butt off to get there, right? And so to go back to what we were saying earlier, you're probably going to fail the first few times. It's probably going to take longer than you think. If your goal is, and I'm not saying you shouldn't have urgency about like trying to make the exit, escape the rat race. I think you should do it as fast as you can, but you want to have the mindset of it being as soon as possible, but also it taking as long as necessary. In other words, if you don't hit that goal, say if your goal is within a year, you're going to keep going. Like you're not going to just give up, lament, and again, call yourself a victim. And that's the mindset that I had. I had urgency about it, but I was like, you know what? I know if I'm not going to, if I don't hit it, if I keep failing or whatever, because I did fail. I failed on e-commerce, for instance. I failed at that. And it wasn't really until I found sales and realized that that was what I was good at, that things started taking off for me. Because even when I built my digital marketing agency, I thought that I didn't want to do sales because I had no
Mm.
experience in sales, and sales seems scary to everybody, right? You don't want to be the sleazy salesman or whatever. And so a lot of people avoid it, including myself. So I avoided it for the longest time, and I had people selling for me, and that really cut into my profit margin and my return on investment and everything. And it wasn't until I started like, okay, I have to start selling some stuff myself and be a part of this process and make sure it happens and do it well, find the right prospects and all that kind of stuff, that it really started taking off. And once I realized like, oh, I like this, like I really like sales, sales is my thing, then it really finally clicked, and then I was able to get over the hump and make everything work. But it took longer than I wanted it to. That's for sure. It took 2.5 years, and I wanted it to be more like 1 year. So yeah, it's gonna be hard. It's gonna take a long time. The 4-hour work week. I don't even like the idea that some people's ideal is a 4-hour work week, because I don't think that should be the goal. I think
Mm.
that the goal should be to find something that you're so passionate about and so good at that you want to work 40 or 80 hours a week on rather than 4 hours on. So it's definitely a process. You got to undertake entrepreneurship knowing that it's going to take a while, and you just got to be of the mindset that I'm going to do this as fast as I can, but also stay in as long as necessary.
Mm. And real quick, did you like save up, 6 months of living
Oh,
expenses and then quit, or kind of how did you go from that full
y-
transition to I'm actually no longer an employee and I'm now a full-time entrepreneur?
yeah. So a lot of people will have different metrics they want to hit.
Hmm.
In terms of savings, I already had the savings. So I
Hmm.
had, I think that that's basic finance. A lot of people will tell you to have 6 to 12 months of savings so that if anything ever did happen, you can live off of that. Like if you lost your job or if you
Hmm.
got injured and couldn't work or whatever, that's just basic finance. So I already had that. But what I wanted to see, what my metric was that I wanted to see the business making at least 80% of what I made as a pharmacist for 3 months in a row.
Mm.
Rather, because with business, your income will go up and down, right? And so 1 month is definitely not enough. Some people, probably more people than not, will want to see more than 3 months. But I had a sense of urgency. I wanted to get the hell out as soon as possible. So 3 months was enough for me, especially with the savings that I had. I didn't have 12 months. I had 6 months saving, and I wanted to see 3 months of profits from the business being enough to support the family essentially. And the thing to keep in mind with that too is that once that's the case and you quit, then you have more time to work on the business. So you're going to be able to solidify that and maybe even boost that even quicker than if you were still burning the candle at both ends. But those were the metrics that I used.
Yeah. And I really think that's a good point. Also, you like you said, the months are going to fluctuate. So, kind of to like we said on that mindset, that income you make every month is not going to exactly hit month after month that number you're looking for. It
Mhm.
might be a little less some months, it might be a little more some months, and that's just part of the process. But for the rest of this episode, I think we've given a great, kind of detail on really what's at stake, the mindset, the journey and the process. But I want to kind of give some people now some key skills. And I know you got some skills, man, in marketing, in sales, and really just overall, to make it simple, it's communication. I think you've done a really good job of using technology that's extremely, extremely abundant today to make these processes for many people starting out new fairly easy and fairly transitional to where they can honestly get a much stronger grasp of sales and marketing and communication with their listeners or potential customers than you know most people think of it when they hear sales. They're either like, oh, I don't like public speaking, or I don't want to come off as too salesy and things like that. But with what's in place with technology and kind of using that to your advantage, I think it's almost immenseful in terms of value and getting you to where you want to be.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, in terms of skills that I would hone in on, you definitely want to, when you start in entrepreneurship, a lot of people will say that you want to invest in a high value skill, and that could be different things, right? That could be copywriting or trading, or it could be e-commerce. It could be a lot of things, right? Whatever kind of piques your interest is what you want to like double down on, and pick one thing. Don't try to do everything. You got to pick one thing, double down on it, invest in yourself. You might have to pay for some courses, master classes, mentorships, masterminds, conferences, whatever it takes, but get good at it. And then though the key though from actually building a business and going from solopreneur status to actually being a real entrepreneur rather than somebody that's just self-employed is to actually stop being, there's a really good book that talks about this, but stop being the technician. It's called The E-Myth Revisited. So you stop being the one that actually does the work, like in terms of that, say it's e-commerce, like say you double down on e-commerce and you really learn how to do it. You know exactly how to do it. What you want to do eventually is create a standard operating procedures, SOPs, basically teaching somebody how to do it if you were to hire them. And then you slowly remove yourself from the process so that you can be the visionary, the dreamer, the one that drives the ship, basically. And you have your employees doing the work in the trenches for you. That's the entrepreneur. An entrepreneur is a visionary. I like to say that they're, a good analogy that I use is that they are like the director of a movie, right? So the director isn't somebody that actually does the acting and writes the script and raises the money himself. He has other people do all of that for him, and he orchestrates the whole thing to hopefully produce a masterpiece. That's an entrepreneur. But when you're just getting started in business and you're just trying to get out, you do have to double down on skills. And I personally think that the best way to get started is sales. Nobody wants to do it, right? Everybody's afraid of it, but and for that reason, there's actually plenty of opportunity, plenty of room for people to come in. But you can be a remote appointment center, remote closer, make really good money. And the great thing about it is that you get really good at the front end of your business. So you get good at sales, you get good at marketing, which are essential business skills, and you're talking to the customers all the time. So you know what their pain points are, you know what their problems are, right? And their problems are potential business opportunities. So once you talk to lots and lots of people, you talk to the marketplace, you start getting ideas about like, I can make a product for that, or I can make a service for that. And so it's a great place to get started is in business, is actually in sales. Again, nobody wants to do it, but a lot of big entrepreneurs, highly successful entrepreneurs got started in sales, like a Mark Cuban or a Gary Vee. Even Warren Buffett probably wouldn't be considered an entrepreneur, he's more an investor now, but he got started in sales. So I push people to do sales because I love it, but also because I think it's the perfect place to start. So that's my thoughts in terms of all that.
Yeah, and I think you really made a super key point as you were saying. An entrepreneur begins to orchestrate and puts these systems and procedures in place for others to execute. And I really think the best way to get that system as prime and refined as possible for others, it could be your first employee or an assistant or however it might be. I think the best way to really get that set of procedure or system in place is by refining it through those sales, really getting your hands there connected and seeing, oh, I was going to have this system in place for them to run with, but after the last few sales calls or communications with a respective customer, I kind of realize I'm missing some key points. And you can refine it to where when you do give it to them to execute, they're able to execute at a high level and continue that kind of standard that you're really setting in place. Along with that, I really think it's key, that, like you said, a lot of people are kind of scared of this and afraid, but I really think it's something that kind of puts you above the pack, because you can almost have a great product, a great service, but if you're not really reaching out properly or doing the right communication, you're kind of just there, and it's really tough.
Hmm. I think the problem that a lot of would-be entrepreneurs have is actually that they think they have a great product or a great service, but because they haven't sold it yet and got the feedback from the marketplace, they don't know, and
Mm,
they waste a lot of time geeking out on their product or service, and then eventually finding out some months down the line that nobody wants it anyway, and
mm,
you just waste a bunch of time that way, a lot of money, a lot of time. And that's another mindset shift too, is that employees, because they're so afraid of failure, have a perfectionist mindset, right? They want to
mm,
perfect the product or the service before they launch it to the public. But the thing that actually matters is getting feedback from the marketplace so that you can tailor your product or service to the marketplace. You're doing it for them. It's a service. Selling is serving. When you actually go out there and give it to your marketplace, and they tell you like, yeah, it's great, but I wish it had this feature, or I wish it did this thing, then you're like, oh, okay, and you go back to the drawing board and you redesign it and send it back out again. That's how you do business. You actually want to sell first. You don't want to keep perfecting and perfecting and perfecting only to find out that you're just wasting a bunch of time.
mm. And that's really the key point, is not getting your head down during this process. And like we said, it's going to be a refining thing. So embrace it. If you start to get reviews and they might say your product stinks, don't just call in the ships and say, all right, forget about it. We tried. That's it. You could be like 1 to 2 adjustments away from, who knows, you could change the world just from a few slight adjustments from that key feedback. So I
Yeah.
really want people to note that once you're finally to that point where you're putting it out there and you're taking the feedback, embrace the feedback, because those slight changes could honestly lead to your business ending up like, the next Apple, the next company that we hear about that many know and have household things that have changed thousands of lives.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would say that those small incremental improvements are what it's all about anyway. A lot of people falsely believe that in order to have a business idea, it has to be completely innovative, like nobody's ever thought of it or done it before.
Mm,
And the reality is actually the opposite. The reality is that completely new, innovative products that the marketplace has never seen before do worse than products that are just an improvement on something that already exists. And the reason is because the marketplace is already familiar with the thing, right? And they want it to be better, but it's not better. So when you introduce something that's an improvement, the marketplace already knows how to use it, and you don't have to explain it to them. Whereas if you introduce something that they've never seen or heard before in their life, you're swimming upstream. It's going to be a lot harder. So take, for instance, somebody that everybody thinks is a genius, very innovative, etc. Elon Musk, right? First one to really roll out electric vehicles on a wide scale, at least really make it work to the point where like you see them all the time. That's not completely different and new, that something that nobody has never seen before, right? It's an improvement on the car. People are already familiar with what a car does and why you would want it to be electric. So it's an improvement. It's those improvements that actually do a lot better. And yeah, you don't, a lot of times you don't know what the market wants until you get in the field and start taking the lumps and getting the feedback. And so failure is not real. It's just part of the process.
mm. I do want to touch on one last skill before we start to finish up here. And I really think this skill is almost just as universal, and especially for family men where you have multiple responsibilities and things like that. I really wanted to touch on before we got done here was time management and really being present. One thing we talked about here today was distraction. And along with that, with everything we've talked about, transitioning from an employee to an entrepreneur, taking in the right material, doing all these things, surrounding ourselves with the right individuals. A key factor of that is time management. That comes with spending time and being present with our family and our kids. And it comes with just as being effective in work and pretty much any area of life. So I do would love to hear your value and your 2 cents on time management as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So I use a journal. It's a bullet journal. So there's a really good book called the Bullet Journal Method that if you're somebody that's kind of ADD or they have a lot going on in their life, it really helps you organize your life in a way that makes sense. And so I'd highly recommend checking that book out to help you with time management. But absolutely with regards to having a balance, there really, I don't really believe there is such a thing as work-life balance. I think that if you were going to actually truly be excellent and great at something, you have to pretty much go all in on it.
Hmm.
And so there is some sacrifices to be made, right? So for instance, in my case, I had to sacrifice my social life like completely. It just came down to like my family and the business, and that's it. And so obviously like that's changed recently because I have a little bit more time. But when I was trying to build it and exit pharmacy, I had to sacrifice somewhere. You can't have your cake and eat it too. You only have so many hours in the day. And so I'm also mentioned the idea of the Pareto principle. And that's actually something that the 4 hour work week talks about, right? The 80-20 rule. You want to try to apply that to every area of your life. There are plenty of things that you do every day. There's plenty of little tasks that don't really move the needle, and you need to get good at identifying what those things are so that you can either eliminate them completely or delegate them to somebody else, or maybe you have a way to like automate it, right? So say it's something as simple as like you go online and pay your credit card bill. Can you put that thing on auto pay? Like so something that just takes something off of your table. So eliminate, automate, delegate, use the 80-20 principle to figure out what really moves the needle. Because when you're a family man and an entrepreneur, you have only so many hours in a day, and you really got to get good at making sure that the things that you are doing are making progress, are moving you towards your goal, your dream. And yeah, so I stay organized with the bullet journal method, and I try to use the 80-20 rule best I can to identify the things that actually make the most difference. And yeah, in terms of focus is that there's another good book that I would highly recommend anybody listening to read this. It's called The One Thing, and that's huge for focus. It'll help you identify what it is you need to double down on. And there is a balance in the beginning between that idea of being okay with failure and focusing. And what I mean by that is you might like I did try a couple of things and either not like it or just not be good at it, like e-commerce, and you might just table that, push it aside, and eventually you find, like I did, sales is really cool. I'm going to go all in on sales and do really well with sales. Maybe do some sales coaching, have an agency, or whatever you want to do with that. But the thing is, once you figure out A, what you're good at, and B, what you like, if they're both the same thing, then that's what you need to focus on. You need to go all in on that and focus on that one thing. I saw a video by Alex Hormozy the other day. He's, I think, one of the greatest entrepreneurs of our generation right now. And he called it the season of no. And it talks about this idea is once you figure out like what it is that moves the needle that you're good at and you like, you should double down on, you say no to everything else, right? They say that when you're just starting out in business, entrepreneurship, you say yes to everything because you're trying to figure out what you want to do, right? You're trying to figure out, do I want to do copywriting or e-commerce or trading or sales or whatever? And eventually, once you get a taste of all those, you realize what it is that you need to do, then you say no to everything else. And that's easier said than done. Everybody has shiny objects in them. There's always these things that come up, these passive income type opportunities that it will come across your screen. You're like, oh, maybe I should invest in this trading bot or whatever. Don't do it. Stay focused. Keep going on the thing that actually moves the needle for you.
Yeah. I really want people to know, the benefits of surrounding themselves as well with someone like yourself. I really think the best way to kind of shorten your learning curve on the journey is not only by taking in the right material, But, finding people like yourself, whether it's for mentoring or coaching or just getting advice, um, like you said, you started to dive into books to change your mindset, and I'm sure you surrounded yourself with others as well. I do want you to kind of touch on, the impact of having the right surroundings as well, because I'm sure that can really make an accelerant of a difference towards, where you're trying to go.
Absolutely, yeah. That old adage that your network is your net worth is cliche, but it's very true. And so, if you're a younger guy, maybe don't have a family, for instance, but you're looking to get into entrepreneurship or surround yourself with high value individuals, I'd highly recommend Arlen Moore's Tribe. Check
Mm.
out him. He's great. It has a very, very large global network of entrepreneurs. Highly recommend it. He'll travel to all kinds of cool places like Dubai or Cape Town or whatever. Super, super great guy too. I really like what he's doing there. But yes, mentorships are huge. I think there's a shortcut, really. Mentorships are usually going to be expensive. High ticket masterminds and mentorships are obviously expensive, but they're the shortest path to really getting to that expert level. When a lot of people start out, they'll start reading books. Maybe they'll buy like a low ticket online course or something like that. And that's fine if, like I said, you're in that stage where you're just trying to figure out what you should focus on. But once you figure out what to focus on, absolutely invest in a mentorship. I do some sales coaching. I do a little bit of just general entrepreneurship coaching too, but especially sales. So if anybody's interested in that, definitely hit me up, DM me on Instagram. But yes, I've had multiple mentors in my life, and it wasn't really until I started investing in mentors and in conferences. Conference is another good one. The problem I think with conferences though is that you'll make connections with people at the conference, and a lot of times it's really hard to maintain that connection afterwards. But conferences are still very good. But I highly, highly recommend mentorships. If you're going to do anything, do mentorships. You get connected immediately with an expert in your field, and usually they already have a network that they introduce you to. So definitely do mentorships. I've had multiple, and I think that moves the needle more than anything.
Perfect, perfect. I got one last question, but before that, I really want to thank you for coming on. I honestly feel like this episode can probably get replayed at least 2 to 3 times, and someone can still find a nugget each time they listen to this. I think you've given almost a notepad worth or a binder's worth, really full of knowledge and value. I think you've really given someone a great foundation on where to get started and kind of how to figure out this journey, especially with how tough times are, and especially if there's individuals out there like yourself that want to provide for their family and achieve that more that they know is out there. But last but not least, when all is said and done, what is the impact that you really want to leave here on this earth and the kind of change you want to see in your lineage? For me, I'm looking to really change a lot within my generation and my lineage for my last name, and I'm sure you have some of the same. So I'd love to hear what your impact and changes here that you want to leave on the earth.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. My mission in the short to intermediate term is to help 1,000 aspiring entrepreneurs, preferably family men, exit their 9 to 5, their rat race, enter in entrepreneurship, and be able to add their value to the world. Because as I said before, I really believe in my heart that the world needs more entrepreneurs, that the world would be a better place if we had more entrepreneurs. And so I'm trying to position myself to be in the right place to be able to help this coming generation that I see coming in, that I suspect are going to be already going to be inclined to entrepreneurship, and help facilitate them do that and educate them and support them and inspire them and hook them up with a good network and all that kind of thing. And then absolutely, with regards to leaving a legacy for my family, I absolutely want to do that as well. I want to be able to leave not necessarily like a business for them to run or anything like that, because they might not be about that. They might have their own unique gifts that they want to do. But I want to be able to homeschool them in large part because I don't think our traditional school system does a good job of setting them up to be a free thinker. I think that the school system, by and large, molds people to be laborers. to be an employee, in other words, not to be entrepreneurs, not to be free thinkers. And so with regards to my family, yes, I want to leave a legacy monetarily, but also in terms of their mindset, mainly the way that they view the world, their worldview. And so yeah, that's my goal, is to flood the world with entrepreneurs, essentially.
Yes, sir. Last but not least, I want to thank you for coming on. Please let people know where they can find you. I would highly recommend reaching out. He's got tons of value. There's content, there's a newsletter, he's on YouTube, he's on Instagram. Please reach out, because I'm telling you, I've seen the work you're doing and it's making great impact, and there's always value provided, whether it's free content or through the coaching that you provide. I know you're doing it out there, and I want to say thank you again. So please let people know where they can find you.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much for the kind words. The best place to go find all of it would probably be just my main website. So it's Brendan Ryan, BRENDAN, Ryan, RYAN.co, not .com, .co. And on there, you'll see a place to sign up for the newsletter, all my socials. My main channel is Instagram. I'm probably not very present on LinkedIn, but I'm pretty much everywhere else, YouTube, Twitter, etc. So you can find me on any of those channels. Feel free to shoot me a DM on any of those channels. And we do have a Discord group too, which is free. So if anybody wants to join, especially if you're an aspiring entrepreneur and you're looking to expand your network, for instance, shoot me a DM and I'll get you into the Discord group as well.
Perfect, perfect. I want to thank you for coming on. Episode 7 was a true blast, and I know it was filled with knowledge. The only thing I want to tell for my listeners in this one, and this is the first time I'm saying this, please, please, please listen to this one more than once. Make sure you have a pen, make sure you have a paper, and thank you for listening, and I hope you all enjoy. This was episode 7 of the Ask and You Shall Receive podcast, and please keep an eye next week for more episodes, and thank you again for listening.